Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and it's wonderful to be here. The slight delay, it's always a tech issue, but you're here, and we're in this time right now, and we are change makers and catalysts because we're here, we're turning up for a very, very strong reason. My name is Liz Blake. I'm your host and the creator of the program, and I'm thrilled to be being co-hosted by Monica Smith, who'll be joining me soon. Now, to let you know what's going to happen today, which is the first of two sessions. Actually, there's going to be a bonus necessary third session closer to the election, but we're going to show you how to vote in Victoria with its peculiar system that is unique to this state. Then we're going to look at what parties and candidates that you want in government and those you most strongly want out, to not get elected, or not be a part of electing them. Now, part of this picture is looking at impacts and consequences of legislation that's driven by this Andrews government with its relentless focus on social engineering. We have two guest speakers tonight who address that. That is Rabbi Shimon Cowan, who is a rabbi, teacher and researcher in the Jewish community of Melbourne, and the Reverend Dr. Peter Barnes, who is moderator of the Presbyterian Church of Australia. Now, this is not all about religion, but they do have an important voice in this. Now, also tonight, we have Victoria's own Battleground Melbourne director, Topher Field, who'll bring his considerable knowledge as a long-time political commentator to what this culture of corruption in Victorian government means and where he sees is the best place to focus in this election. We'll flesh this out and the voting, the help with voting, because that is the focus. We'll flesh it out in over 2 nights, and we'll build it. It is in a sequence. Now you can watch session 1 or session 2, but really you need both. And it is sequenced for learning so that we just don't dump stuff on you, because Victoria does operate differently. Surprise! So this program is designed so that you can share the sessions with non-conservative friends as well, and colleagues who haven't yet seen what we've seen but aren't closed tight. To get maximum benefit, I'm going to ask you and challenge you to do a little bit of homework, which we'll set out clearly. Oh, and I can see all the live chat. Hi, everyone. It's awesome to see you. It's really cool. So yes, we have homework. Okay, and that will help you in the learning, how to master this, and you can then pass that on to other people. Great kitchen table and coffee chat. Now, advance notice too. Tomorrow night I'll be announcing something to help all those skilled professionals, nurses, teachers in the health area, and others who lost their jobs or careers by the mandates. That's at the end of tomorrow night. Now, at this moment, I wanted to introduce Monica, and she's just got there's a little technical challenge here because she is on the road. And so I'm going to have to actually put that back a little way. And so if you'll forgive us, Monica is going to set the scene, because this education is about voting for a fair Victoria. And Monica is going to set the scene and just give the basics of how the system works. So we're going to have to actually backtrack that slightly. Just in the meantime, I might give you 1 second. I'm only going to flip through this because one thing I'm going to, you don't know, is that I've got a few resources. And so that you don't have to be busily writing everything down, all the people who are registered will receive this here. I'm going to, here we go. You'll receive this, and you can see from what's on the screen there right now that I've just got a little diagram there of how the lower house steps up to the higher house, and that they're just little sort of fun facts that we need to know to vote wisely. And that's all I need there. I don't need to. I need to remove that now. So Monica will come on very shortly, and if you'll forgive me, I've got to keep my eye on being able to let her in. Okay, so there are a little bit of difficulties in the internet when you're traveling interstate, but she's good enough to do this. And we all know Monica; she's very, very well loved, Monica Smith, and I'll introduce her when I'm able to welcome her. Okay, so I'm going to now. I'm just reorganizing myself here. Okay, so let's just fast forward a little bit and just to put in your minds that Monica has laid the groundwork, and in that groundwork there's something, and this is the little sticky part in Victoria. There's something called group voting tickets. Now we want to demystify that tonight, and well, it needs demystifying, but I'm going to now take up on that. I'm going to love reading these comments more later. And by the way, please put your questions in there too, because we'll be able to look at them later and put a response together, because I can't do everything at once. Okay, where are we? Okay, so let's fast forward into the program a little bit and look at, okay, what sort of parties do we want in government? So this is a vote your values in, and so I've got a list of small parties here, and you can see that that there's some in bold. There's about 6 in bold. Now, not everyone's going to agree with me for this, but I'm going to say why that I would put these as values / morals freedom parties. Now, freedom is an important thing, because under that freedom is freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and those very absolutely human things. Like it's all it is to be a human. Well, a lot of what it is to be a human. So we've got here the freedom. So among these small parties, I'm really going to make a strong point, and I hope that the small party lead candidates are watching, get to watch this, because it's very important for us to have unity amongst the small parties. Now I'm actually a member of no party, because I need to be neutral in this, completely neutral. And so there needs to be a unity, even though that, like a higher unity to preference each other, at that higher level above the competition, and they are in competition, and that's good. So now when you go to any of these parties, of course, they've got their websites. You can get they've got all their candidates who are standing in different regions. This is going to make sense a lot more a little bit shortly. Okay, I'll move on. So those there, now I've got the Freedom Party of Victoria, Democratic Labor Party. That is the only moral voice on the left. So I'm putting them up there. Family First, Liberal Democrats, Independence Party, Catherine Cummings, that is still pending, and One Nation. Now, the others are all in that list as well. Now, I've got an asterisk against the Lib Dems and Catherine Cummings' Independence Party, because, we have different views about, well, what makes up, a values, morals, a freedom party. And I do know that, like, we're all Victorians, and these 3 people, I mean, 2 from the Lib Dems and Catherine Cummings, and I'm not recommending anything, I'm just saying that they were the ones who stood up consistently all throughout, and so they do genuinely stand for freedom. So I'm putting them in there, and I really wish Catherine Cummings all the best in her coming through. Okay, so then we've got, so there you are there, and oh, we've got a speaker on coming soon that's kind of this is awesome for that. Oh yeah, you have to read that book. That is like a trip down memory lane. That's like, whoa. And actually, when I say that, that's actually can be quite difficult, and that's why it's not easy to bring up this topic of voting to some of our friends who we were, of course, estranged from. But it is time to make friends again, and I think things are softening. Okay, so I don't think I need to do that yet. Sorry about this. I'm just a little bit, well, not rattled, but slightly. Okay, so there is also a site, and all this will be in the PowerPoints. The slides were a bit blurry. You will get them in your email. Okay, thank you for telling me. I don't think I can fix that. Okay, so there are sitting members. There's a website that you'll get in the resources, in the PowerPoint. It's all together. I'll email that out tonight. So make sure you're registered for this, because it's the only way to get the emails. That's voteyourvaluesin.com. You need to register and you get everything. But amongst those is a site. It's actually a Wikipedia site, which I'm not terribly thrilled, amazed with. Wikipedia is not always right, but they've got a very good link there that lists all the sitting members and all the candidates who are contesting it and their parties in every seat, in every electorate and every seat. So it's really good for looking up. So how's our time going? I'm going to just check this, how Monica's going. No, it's not looking good yet. So we might have to go back to Monica, might do a reversal in learning. Okay, so I'm going to now bring us to the present, where we are now. Okay, so there's the voting, which is the main thing that we're going to, move into. But bringing us back to the present, we are there's a psychological, social, and global crisis. Now, I'm just going to touch on this only a bit, but we need a new atmosphere over Victoria is needed. Many of us are tired and jaded. I'm inviting a mindset of renewal that opens up energy and hope. The reason I prioritise interactivity also in any programs I do is that they build social relationships. That's why at the back end of this, we've got the Cloud Hub group. We've got a Telegram group too, but I want to shift over to Cloud Hub because it's a lot more conversational. And so this is not just a webinar. There is a whole lot of support and conversation that's going to go right through to the election and beyond, okay? So we are in a collective psychological phenomenon that history tells us will slide down to totalitarianism proper unless people keep speaking up, when that's what we are doing. We've been conditioned to treat our friends as biohazards. This is not news, is it? We've been told that by connecting that we're endangering the public, but we must talk to each other and connect. That's what we're doing. Now, at a global level, well, that's what we're beginning to do. At a global level, there is universal uncertainty. Now, this is important in the voting because when we talk to people, this affects them. There's this global psychological thing that's going on at the moment. But the uncertainty is universal, and we can see that with the consumer confidence index in America right now is at the lowest point. That it's ever been since that matrix was measured. So that's an interesting thing. Now, this is not a doomsday report, but I'm just making the point that not much is certain except the values that undergird and gave compassion, that undergirded and gave compassion to our society. These are universal values and morals. So where politically, very soon we've got our next speaker on, which is I'm very excited about. So where politically do small parties fit into this picture? They actually have a great role. They have an important role. And where do they fit, in this picture? Because the system is set up to support and keep to maintain the big parties in power. And now, both Liberal and Labor started with strong morals, and they grew from that, and then they've lost their way. They're now a mess of conflicting policies and infighting, as we know, and they need to be forced to clean themselves up and find their compass again, their moral compass again. Now, on the other hand, Greens are winning seats very strongly, consistently. What are they doing? Their ideology is the new religion. The Liberals and Labor could actually would do well to take a new leaf from them in the strong moral stand, in the standing for universal values. So the small parties, the role, they can at the least be a moral force pulling the big parties forward to a better position of moral strength. That's at least, and at best, who knows? But we've got a long way to go before they can become, perhaps, some can really rise to the surface. I hope it's not that long. So consistently, the Andrews government has just driven legislation to enforce the elimination of universal values from society, prescribe limits to parenting and family, and replacing them with the faceless mechanistic state. The enforcement of the ideology is totally changing the shape of our society with dire consequences that are generational. Now, this program is bringing a balanced view, and that's what we're attempting to do, and across some religious and political spectrums. The new landscape is not so much left-right, although that's what people generally talk about, but it's not. I've studied political science, and it's quite complex, but it's probably closer to big government, small government. That's probably. But there is right and wrong at the centre of it. And some freedom parties who tend to be centre-right, or who are centre-right, have a solid moral stance. Some of them do. And at the moment, the DLP, Democratic Labor Party, is now alone as the moral left. So we're representing both sides. We're bringing both sides forward. Now, the media and major parties would love these people to fight. They would love that, but we need to keep the maximum unity between those moral parties above the competition. Now, 2 of our 3 guest speakers tonight, 2 of them are at the end, and we've got one in about half a minute probably. And the 2 at the end are eminent religious leaders of different world religions, and to speak to the universal values versus the Dan Andrews social engineering governance. I've challenged these religious leaders to step beyond their own religious framework and include even the perspective of a non-believer. And you can see I gave them a couple of, when you see it, I didn't hold back, put it that way. Because, you can have great values, and our society can have great values and not necessarily be of a faith. But taking common ground against this anti-democratic, anti-God direction for freedoms, whoever your God is really, but for freedoms and universal values is what we're doing. So I'd invite you to listen today to them later with openness, and see if you can see with a fresh light some justice. Now I'm going to welcome with great gratitude, actually, Topher Field.
Liz, how are you?
I'm great. I just want to introduce you. Not that they need it, but I think I should. Topher Field has been a political commentator for over a dozen years now, and a leading advocate for less government and more freedom. He's been speaking out on issues such as a very broad range of issues, as like freedom of speech, water management. Gee, that's a bit topical. Red tape, taxation, climate change. Very topical. I'd say Topher doesn't mind being in the heat. He's also an Australian documentary filmmaker, multi-award winning, and also award-winning libertarian political commentator and human rights activist. So I've also followed Topher through his walk. I've followed his walk through the last 3 years, and I particularly wanted him here. So thank you.
Liz, look, thank you so much for having me. I feel honored that you would. You did leave out one thing in my bio there, that I am a cigar connoisseur and a deep appreciator of tobacco.
And I'm just feeling jealous.
Please forgive me as I do indulge. This is my version of meditation. You were talking about various religions and so forth. This is meditation for me. So forgive me as I do enjoy that. Liz, can I just say, I'm so grateful that you have found the energy somehow to do this. This education is so vitally important, and I've known that, but there was no way I was ever going to find the time and the energy to put this together. And I'm so grateful that you have, and that I get to just pop in, say my piece, and then pop back out again. And you're the one that has to deal with all the organizing and everything else. So thank you so much for putting this together.
That's a pleasure. And I've got 2 questions for you.
Sure.
So, Topher, you've seen a lot over the years. Australia all over the world, all over Australia and all over the world. And one of them, at least one I know of, was communist, that you spent a lot of time in.
Sure.
So there's a lot of life experience there. You're a prolific reader, you're a prolific observer and serious participator. Can you give us, this is the first question, can you give us a snapshot of the web of Andrew's government corruption and what it means?
I'm sorry. I thought this was the... Yeah.
My job is to keep a straight. No, I'll keep a straight face. To give us a snapshot of that web, and what does it mean for us at this time?
A snapshot of the web of Daniel Andrews' corruption. I didn't realize you'd allocated 10 hours to my segment. I thought it was only 15 minutes. There's no way that I could possibly cover all of it. Look, the reality is I was thinking about this in preparation for tonight, and the realization that there's a very real sense in which Daniel Andrews' corruption is very well documented now. And we've had whistleblower after whistleblower. Just recently, we've seen it come out again in relation to the dismissal of the red shirt scandal and potentially high-level police interference in that investigation, shutting that down when it shouldn't have been. Now, I don't have any information personally. I'm just repeating what other people have said, the allegations that other people are making. But when you look at the red shirt scandal, when you look at all of the scandals around how money gets spent, I mean, where did all the money for those 2,000 hospital beds that we were going to have? You remember the 2,000 emergency room hospital beds that we were going to have as a response to COVID-19? You remember back early in COVID-19, and Daniel Andrews said, we need to flatten the curve, and we're going to spend all this money to get all these extra hospital beds to increase capacity. That was the deal. You make the sacrifice of flattening the curve and suspending your business and suspending your life for a few weeks, and we spend the money and we build up the hospital capacity. And yet somehow that never happened, right? The money that was spent on hotel quarantine, the many scandals predating COVID, even as you go back in Daniel Andrews' career. I mean, this is a guy who has had the whiff of corruption, the smell of corruption has followed him everywhere that he's gone. Now, I'm not saying any specific corruption, but there are many, many skeletons in that closet. And I don't think we're going to actually meet a lot of those skeletons until probably after Daniel Andrews gets kicked out of power. And then a lot of those are going to come emerging. I mean, there's Sluggate and there's all kinds of different things. And as I thought about what would be the most valuable thing for me to discuss here tonight, I realized it probably isn't all of that, because I think most of us are already pretty familiar with the idea that this guy should not be where he is. There's the idea of a post turtle. Have you heard of a post turtle? It's if you were walking along through farmland or what have you, and you came across a fence. Well, a fence is common enough, but there's a post, and on top of it, there's a turtle, and he's there with his arms flailing, right? You don't know how he got there, but you know he didn't get there by himself, right? The one thing you know for sure is that turtle did not get on top of that post all by himself. And it's the same with Daniel Andrews. You look at him and you're like, how did this flailing, bumbling moron get to be where he is? And the answer is not by himself. And so, look, I won't go any deeper into that, but it's our job to remove him. It's our job to say, you know what? 2 terms is long enough for you, mate. Off you go. On your bike. Get out of our lives. Now, I think the more important thing to discuss, and this may actually relate, Liz, to some of the religious leaders that you've got a little bit later on, is not so much Daniel Andrews in person, but what Daniel Andrews represents at that government level. Because what we've entered now is an era where governments have successfully convinced people to remove God, any form of God, from the public sphere. We can't have the 10 commandments in courthouses anymore because, saying thou shalt not steal and thou shalt not lie would create a very hostile work environment for lawyers, right, whose profession is to lie and help people to steal. So we've got God out of our courthouses. We've got God out of our parliament, prayer and so forth, out of our schools, etc. We're pushing God away. But what's fascinating to me is that in the mind of someone like a Daniel Andrews is this belief that he can actually take the place of God. That's fundamentally what it comes down to. And I want to give you a couple of examples of that. And we as a culture have accepted this, by the way. And you don't have to be a Christian or a Muslim or anything else. You don't have to believe that there's a God to see this simile. You can be an atheist and believe that there is no God, but you can still see how the government is trying to take the place of God. Look into the Hebrew Old Testament and the names that God gave himself in that text. Believe it or not, okay, the text exists and there are certain claims made. Jehovah Jireh, which means my provider, the one who provides for me. Well, who do we look to today for provision when things go wrong? Well, we look to the government, of course, welfare, etc. Jehovah Nissi, my healer. Well, who do we look to for hospital care and healing? Well, the government, of course. Now, it's not to say that hospitals are bad. Hospitals are a wonderful thing. Modern medicine, amazing, with some exceptions. But by and large, modern medicine, fantastic. But it doesn't mean the government has to be the one that provides that to you and hands it to you on a platter. God in the Hebrew Old Testament has these names that, the giver of wisdom, the protector, etc. Well, who runs our schools now? Who gives us wisdom? Who protects us? Runs the police, runs the military? We've given to the government all of these roles that have been claimed by God in religions across the world. Again, believe in God or not, that's the role that's been claimed by God, and it's now being claimed by government, and it's especially being claimed by government under Daniel Andrews. I want to give you a specific example, and again, this is not about whether you agree with this particular policy. Step aside from whether you agree with the policy and have a look at what this represents in terms of the position that Daniel Andrews believes that the government should hold in our lives. The change suppression conversion bill, I can't remember the exact wording of the title of the bill, that was passed. Now, the idea of this bill, the way the bill was sold, was that it's going to protect young and vulnerable people who are confused about their gender from people who might want to tell them that they're wrong and that actually they are the gender that they were born as. And it's going to protect these people. That was the argument. But what the bill actually does is it criminalizes prayer. And if you're a pastor or a Christian counselor or a Muslim counselor or any other religion, and a young person comes to you and says, you know what, I'm really confused and conflicted, and I don't feel like I am the gender that I was born as. I think maybe I might be a girl instead of a boy or a boy instead of a girl. And if you say to that person, I see the pain that you're in, and I want to help you and I want to support you, and I think the best thing to do is for us to pray that God would help you to come to terms with who you were born as, and that you would actually come to accept yourself for who you were born to be. That counselor, that pastor is now a criminal. This is not a civil issue, the way that, for example, section, was it 13C of the Anti-Discrimination Act, right? If you were offended by someone, you could launch a civil suit. This is a criminal offense. And the state government can charge you with crimes for daring to pray with somebody, even if that person was happy, even if that person wanted that prayer and walked out of that meeting feeling edified, feeling supported, feeling like they got what they came for. The state can charge you as a criminal because the state is now taking the status of God, and they want to tell you how you may and may not pray. Now, whether you're religious or not, that should deeply concern you. The implications for freedom of speech, freedom of debate, the right to have a contrary idea to what the government says you must have, ought to be of deep concern to each and every one of us. I would not say that Daniel Andrews has been a bad politician. I think he's been a fantastic politician politically. He is very, very astute. He's very clever. What makes him dangerous is that he has a God complex, and that he thinks that he deserves in our lives the power of God to tell us what we have to believe, tell us what we're allowed to pray, tell us when we can worship and how many people, and whether we have to wear masks and whether we're allowed to sing. This man has a God complex. And putting aside all of the many scandals, all of the skeletons in the closet, of which there is an army. There is an army. It looks like a remake of The Mummy. Right? There are so many skeletons in that closet. If you opened up that closet, you'd have an army marching across the desert, right? We all know that. But actually, what makes this man dangerous is not just the corruption that surrounds him, the stench of corruption, but it's the God complex. And that's what we saw come out in the COVID era, 2020 and 2021, that he believed it was his role and his rightful place to come on our televisions every single day for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, with an interminable press conference where he would micromanage every detail of our lives. This man believes that he is God. And we have the opportunity on November 26th to remind him that he is not.
Topher, you brought out some really strong points there. That's the point you just made there is very powerful, and I'd really recommend that people actually listen to that again. And yeah, I don't think I want to comment any further, but so based on all, and this is the line in the sand that was a bit waffly for many years, and we are starting to calling ourselves up, calling people up to, there is a line in the sand, and no leader is God. That's exactly
right. That's right.
Yeah. So Topher, where do you see the best place for us to focus? Because it's fine to feel things, but to do something about it strategically, to unseat Dan Andrews and start
100%.
just in a 2 or 3 minutes, if you can, start a state turnaround from this election.
All right. So I have a habit of taking a very long time to answer, so I'll try and keep this one short for you. What I would love to see is what I modeled and what I did at the federal election unsuccessfully when I was running for the Senate in Tasmania. And to their credit, Steve Mav from the One Nation Party and Diana Adams from the United Australia Party, when I announced that I was running down there for the Liberal Democratic Party, they welcomed me with open arms. They said to me, Topher, can we come to your campaign launch? Can we come to your announcement? Can we tell other people to come along and boost the numbers and get more people there? Can we work together? And I said, yes, please. I would love nothing more, because what we need to be doing is working together. Now, there's a lot of talk of the need for unity, right? And that's a good thing. I agree. But unfortunately, what many of the candidates and what many of the politicians mean when they say we need to be united, what they mean is you all need to unite behind me. That's the unfortunate reality of what they're saying. In many cases, there's certainly exceptions, but in many cases, that's what they're saying. And what needs to happen, and I know that this is going to be covered in this course, is that intelligent voters need to use our preferential voting system that we have here in Victoria to list every single freedom-friendly candidate. I don't care which one you put first. I genuinely don't. I mean, they do. Of course they do. They're going to argue for themselves, and that's fine. That's their job. That's their role in all of this. You pick your favorite and you champion them. And you get loud and you lift them up as high as you possibly can. But in the process of doing that, don't disparage the others. Don't belittle the others. Don't create division between your chosen candidate and the others. Say, listen, this is the person that I'll be voting for, number one, and I would love for you to do the same thing. But then once you put a number one next to their name, would you please put a number two next to that one, and a number three next to that one, and a number four next to that one, and make sure that we're using the preferential voting system. This is my number one frustration, Liz. Our forebears, our ancestors had incredible foresight, giving us a preferential system. I won't bore you with the technical statistical details, but it's clear that a preferential system leads to better outcomes. When I say better, sorry, let me clarify better, leads to outcomes that are more representative of the will of the people than any other system. The preferential system is not a problem, it is an opportunity. But our education system has let us down. And people don't understand what they're holding when they have that vote and that ballot paper and that opportunity with a preferential system in their hand. And people like you, Liz, are helping to fill that education gap. We need to vote number one. Pick your candidate. I'm not going to tell you who it has to be. Pick them. I don't care. Make them number one. And then make the other guy number two and the other lady number three and the other person number four, whatever. I don't care. Just make sure that every single one of them is on your ballot paper before you put any of the major parties. And don't put any of the socialist, crazy, whatever, big government ones on there at all. Myself personally, full disclosure, this is how I'm going to be voting. Not to create division. I'm not saying how you need to vote, but I'm giving you an example. Okay? I will personally be putting the Liberal Democratic Party number one because, in my opinion, they earned it through the COVID era. David Limbrick, Tim Quilty. That's my personal opinion. Okay, and then I'll be finding every other candidate: One Nation, UAP, Freedom Victoria Party, IMOP if they're still around. I'm not sure if they're running in Victoria. I'll literally be going through the ballot paper, going, "Who else is here? Who else can I put at number 2, 3, 4, 5? I want to put them all." Right? If you're out in the West, support Catherine Cumming and the Independence Party if she manages to get that registered. There's some troubles there, right? Support these people. And then the very last one that I will be putting will be the Liberal Party. Now, that means the Labor Party, the Greens, etc., won't be on my ballot paper at all. Okay, just to be clear, when I say I'm putting the Liberals last, I'm not putting them below Labor. I'm not putting them below Greens. Greens and Labor and all the crazy, Transport Matters and all those nonsense parties, they're not on my ballot paper at all. I'm voting below the line. And I'm going number 1, Liberal Democratic Party, number 2, whoever, all of the freedom-friendly parties. And then the last thing I will do is put the Liberal Party, right? And the reason for that is not because I think the Liberal Party are better than the Labor Party, but it's because I think after what we've endured, we have to send a message. If we re-elect the Labor Party, it sends a terrible message about who we are and what we stand for and what we're willing to accept. So even though I have no faith whatsoever in the Liberal Party, I will still put them at the very bottom of my ballot to make sure that they get elected ahead of Labor. Yes. Because of what it says about us if Labor get re-elected. So in practical terms, that's what I mean. But the principle is very, very simple. Please don't talk down the candidates, the freedom-friendly candidates that you don't like. No matter how much you may disagree with their policies, no matter how much you may disagree with the fact that they're engaging with what's his name, Jeff Drury, I can't even remember his name, and the whole how to vote card, the group voting tickets thing, whatever your divisions may be, please don't use them as an opportunity to talk down somebody else. Talk up your candidate. Talk up the support, lift up the person that you believe in, and then talk about the fact that all of the others need to be ranked below them before anybody else. That is the only way that we're going to see and send a meaningful message in this election.
Thank you very much, Topher. We share a lot of common ground there, and through the rest of tonight and tomorrow, we're going to flesh that out a little bit more, so that you actually can see the steps that you can take and that you can share over a kitchen table. But there's a lot of wisdom there. Thank you very much, Topher. Thank you I know this was sacrificial time, but thank you very much.
Liz, it's my pleasure. And just again, before I go, thank you so much for putting this together. It's so important. Our education system has let us down, and there are grown adults that don't understand how a preferential system works, and you're helping to fill that gap. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm very grateful.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, good night then for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so that was a treat to hear that, and I know everyone enjoyed listening to Topher, his wisdom. And now we're going to come back to Monica with the basics with Monica shortly, I hope. But if something goes wrong, we will fill the gap. Don't worry about that. Okay. So I'm going to now just spend a couple of minutes on. So what's the big message for all Victorians? And this is the big message. This is what I'm going to this is what I'm memorizing is now. Before I finish my sentence, it's the context of this is when we talk about vote below, up, above the line. That is the ballot that is the upper house, and that's the big, giant white one. We call it, well, I heard it called the tablecloth, and it pretty much is like a tablecloth. And so when we're talking about above the line, below the line, and preference, that's sort of a lot of what we're workshopping over these 2 nights, we're referring to the upper house, and I'll keep repeating that so that you don't think everything's the same. There is a lower house that we're voting for and an upper house, but it's the upper house that really needs a very large table. I saw that. That's great. So the big message for all Victorians that I've got is vote below the line unless. That's what I would say. Vote below the line unless. When I've got a bit of adrenaline going, I get very thirsty. So in the upper house. So when you've got your favoured party, I'm going to skip. I'm going with what Topher said. Okay, so now I'm getting a little bit more detailed. Okay, now so you will want to see your party's group voting ticket, and that's kind of like that's Victorian lingo for how to vote card, okay, except works a bit differently. But so you can examine your party. I'm talking about your favoured party or a couple of favoured parties, and the ones in your area, because that's what's relevant. You don't have to look at all of the parties. It's the ones that representing your area, being represented in your area, contesting your area. And when you look at your group voting ticket, and you can see where party, let's call it the hopeful party, okay, we'll make up one, where the hopeful party has got all their preferences, dotted over the place. And if you can look and see, oh, okay, they're preferenced with, they're roughly in line, the ideology, they're roughly in line, their values, freedom. Yeah, I can see they've stood up for us, and, you know, their values and freedom. That's cool. Okay, and if you think they've selected a really good alignment, if that party has selected a really good alignment, you could just vote above the line 1, and then their preferences that they have set will take over. Okay, so that's the one instance that I would do that. Now, the fact is that about 90% of people vote just above the line because they get confused between Victoria and federal system. It's very different. Okay, and this is the tragedy of no education. But vote below the line unless. So if you want more of a say, number one, more of a say in the order it flows down those small parties, or if that your favoured party that you really like and is worthy of your vote, if they have a group voting ticket that you think, no, there's something in there I really don't like, you can still vote for them. Just vote below the line. I hope that's clear. If anything's not clear, bring it through to the questions. And I like using a whiteboard, and it's probably going to complicate things. So I'm sort of keeping myself down there, and that's why I'm providing the PowerPoints. Now, I've got to watch my time. Okay, so working with these group voting tickets, because this is an educational program, okay, only in Victoria, if I say GVT, it's group voting ticket, okay? But so in that case, the party, for their group voting tickets, the parties have determined where they want all their preferences to go, okay? So the implications are, well, actually, I'll just skip forward. About 2 weeks before the election, which is actually noon, Sunday the 13th of November, all parties will have had, all registered parties will have had to submit their group voting ticket, and it's locked off, you know, and they cannot change it after that. So, you know, it's set in stone then. Now, this opens up the possibility for you, if you've got any concerns, to go and talk to your candidate, to go to some of their events, which we want to do anyway, and not in a disruptive way. I would not take on a good small party and speak unwisely in public, but just ask them, you know, what are you doing with your group voting, your group voting ticket? What direction is it going in that? I just want to know because I want to know. I just want to know. Okay, so you can do that and have some input there. Now that's good active participatory democracy. That is actually democracy. And if they were, you know, it gives you input. Let's say that it gives you input. Now, moving on to a little bit more detail, where we're perhaps giving you a couple of recommendations just for tonight, and we'll develop them more tomorrow night, to start ordering your preferences. Now, you can just have any of the small parties in any preference, just like Topher said, if you like. But if you want to put your favourite first, like your Freedom or Lib Dems, or I lost the list, you know, Catherine Cumming, if she comes through, or Family First, there were 6 of them. Okay, so forgive me for not bringing the others straight up to my head. But, you know, you may have a preference for that, for how you want them to go. And now what we're going to say is actually based, what I'm going to be delivering in a little bit more detail over the next of these nights is based on a lot of math, algorithmic analysis that some other people are doing in the background. And it's mind-boggling, but it's quite interesting. So I can feel confident that what I'm recommending is sound. There's a lot of work that goes into that it's not just my ideology or some thought that this just happens to be convenient. It's not that at all. So this is basically it. First of all, I would say the first thing is to categorize all the parties, all the candidates and their parties who are going to be standing in your area, and we're talking the upper house at the moment. So categorize them and see, okay, all the small parties, like Topher said, all the small parties that are good or okay or I love, anywhere between love to they're okay. They're okay. And then distinguish the ones that you think, I wouldn't want them in government. I don't want them elected. I want them to not succeed again. Okay, they'll be categorized in the never. So you have a good okay and a never. Okay, so you can sit down with a piece of paper if you like. It's I'm going to do this with my grandkids. And if they're watching this, they're probably thinking, oh no, Nan's coming over. I said I might do an election party for them. So thrilling. Okay, so where was I? So small parties that are okay, good for values, freedom, or good whatever. Small parties you never want elected. And then also note, just as Topher said, and actually I know Monica's got this too, and it is good thinking that the Liberals, while they have not done an amazing job, we've certainly seen that in the last couple of years, they've been weak. They've lost their way in that, but they are far better to work with quality candidates and conscience candidates. They'll be far better to work with than anything that it is now in power, than what is in power at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to give you some homework. Now I'm going to just set this homework, and then we'll set up for, just see how Monica's faring. Oh, it's almost there. It's there almost. Okay, so I will switch over to, okay, seeing here, I'll flick through. Okay, so all that I said before is on these slides. I didn't follow that. Okay, so let's get civic. I haven't got a dance for that. But anyway, so look up your region and district, and all the links are here. Check your Victorian address, because there's been some redistributions and you may be in a different area to what you thought. So just check that out following those links. And then look through and there's that other link, see who's sitting and who's contesting in your area. So this is just stepping it out for you, and then so that you get to know the system. And then just as I said before, list and categorize your favorites. And then I'm going to ask you ask you to share your findings and what you felt about this exercise, what you felt about tonight in the Clout Hub, the new site. We're in Telegram. If you want to go there, you can too, but I do want to shift that over to Clout Hub. Okay, so and now just a couple of announcements before we go up to the next wave, where you want to sandwich the less exciting things in the middle. Okay, so there is the link for the Clout Hub group. You can come in. You won't be allowed in straight away because it is moderated, and it's a private group and I have to let you in. So it's okay when you go there, it's worked, you're just waiting for me. What's on tomorrow? You'll get an email. If you're registered, you'll get an email 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. But basically tomorrow we are expanding on the voting strategy for Victoria's peculiar preferencing system. And we'll go into the 2 levels. And if you're a level 1 person, zone out. I'm going to tell you now, zone out for 3 minutes, go make a cuppa. And then come back, and then I'll call you back. But if you're a more avid voter, you might want a level 2, that information. Right, and so we will also expand on how the Andrew government has failed this state, but in a way that you can share outside our kind of bubble. There will be, where are we? I beg your pardon, guest speakers, Sheikh Mohammed Salim and Hugh Dolan, who is the state president for the DLP. So, and that's what I talked about being fair. This is not partisan. We're not standing for any party, but I'm the moral party of the left. So Hugh Dolan, he's just got a little brief interview as well, and they will relate how grave this government's drastic overreach is with punitive legislation against the expression of universal values. Like, if we've got any doubts about our line in the sand, we have to clear that. Watch for emails. All registered will get the PowerPoint, as I said. You'll get recordings, and actually you can just go back to this channel and share the channel anyway, but when you're registered, you get information. And also I want to just alert you too that there are other people doing really awesome stuff. Joel Jamal is putting on some very strong things soon, and we're going to be chatting in a couple of days and that. And he does good quality work. So he does very good quality work. So I think this is exciting. I really like that classified one. I'd better leave that now, because before I get too excited about it, I've got a little bit of a detective nose. Okay, let me see if I can. If you will just give me 1 moment, please. I'm going to try and get this happening. Just it's been out of our control. So just be patient 1 moment.
Victoria and anyone else who might be watching, it's crazy to think that about 6 or 7 months ago we were doing this exact thing for the federal election, and here we are again, trying to do our best to make our vote count in Victoria. And I just want to address, before I go into anything too detailed, that a lot of people watching right now and that will watch later worked tirelessly to do whatever they could to impact the federal election. And it was quite difficult after it all happened. Now, we've spent a few months sort of recovering from that, I guess. And I felt that as well, by the way. But I just want to say that, I just want to reiterate to you that actually Australians did vote for change. They just didn't know what kind of change they wanted. The Labor government only got in on 33% of the vote, which is definitely not a majority. So I do think that Australians do want change, and I definitely think that Victorians want change, and we are going to do whatever we can, even if we are tired afterwards, right? Because it's always better knowing that you did the best no matter what happens. And we do have a chance in the Victorian election, especially because of how bad Daniel Andrews actually is, blatantly bad. So that's kind of working in our favor. We also learned a lot from the federal election campaign. From where I was sitting, from a personal point of view, actually, I learned that there is a point where we really have to bat for a particular team. You can't support all of the freedom parties equally. It's just impossible. You've got to pick a team and support them 100%. Because if you give 25% of yourself to 4 different parties, that's not going to help anyone. There was even people handing out more than one how to vote card at the polling booths, which is really, really confusing. So we're not going to make the same mistakes again, are we? We've learned some valuable lessons. And trust me, we'll keep you up to date on the RDA emails, the website, Liz's email database as well. We're going to give you all the parties, what they stand for, what their values are, so that you can choose which team you want to support. Remember that the polling booth time is the most important, really. Of course, if you have time pre-polling booth, that would be fantastic too. But really, you do have time to pick a team if you only have a particular amount of time available. If you have more time, then you should start really doing your research now, actually. Before I go into too much, remember that Daniel Andrews actually has to win his seat to get elected. People from Brunswick or from the city or left-leaning suburbs like that, they can't vote for him. Only people in the Mulgrave district can vote for Daniel Andrews. And actually, they are working class people, which I'm pretty sure he quite annoyed during the lockdown. So that is a good thing. Even if Labor gets back in, but Dan doesn't, I would be pretty happy with that. I mean, I wouldn't be happy that Labor got in, but that would be a win in itself. And I think we could celebrate that at least. I know some people who are actually driving out of their way to volunteer in Mulgrave. They don't even live there. They can't even vote there because they're so passionate about getting rid of Dan. So I think that seat's going to be a really a hotbed for volunteering. So if you're really passionate about getting Dan out, you might consider the same thing. Anyway, I will be going into volunteering a bit more tomorrow, and RDA is going to really provide everything that you need to know about helping these different parties out and helping you choose which one. So now I'm going to give you a really brief look at how the voting works for the Victorian election. And I'll even give you what I'm personally going to do. Now, we can't go into huge detail because the voting cards are not finalized because all the candidates haven't been obviously registered and announced. And also there's other things that come into play as well. So just keep tuned on the RDA website, on Liz's emails, and you'll absolutely know everything you need to know when the time is right. I promise. Just keep up to date. Don't worry. Okay, so now I'm going to get into what are the basics, the very basics of voting in Victoria. So I'm going to play a video for you right now.
Voting is simpler than you'd think. When you vote in a state election, you're voting for who you want to represent you in the two houses of the state parliament. There's the Legislative Assembly, known as the lower house. The party or parties that win the majority of seats in the lower house forms a government. And the Legislative Council, known as the upper house. The lower house ballot paper is the smaller of the two ballots issued to you. To vote, put the number 1 in the box next to the candidate you most want to see elected. Then number all the other boxes in order of your choice. Number every box and only use each number once. The upper house ballot paper is the larger of the two ballots, and there are two options for completing it, above or below the line. To vote above the line, put the number 1 next to your preferred group of candidates in one of the boxes above the black line. This means that your preferences will be determined by the group you vote for, in line with one of its group voting tickets, which you can check out on the VEC website before you vote. That's it for voting above the line. You leave the rest of the ballot unmarked. To vote below the line, you need to number at least 5 of the candidate boxes below the black line in order of your preference. You can continue numbering if you wish, but you must choose at least 5 candidates. Oh, and if you make a mistake, just ask the election staff for new ballot papers. They can help you with other voting queries as well. See? Too easy. Visit vec.vic.gov.au for more information.
So that's pretty simple, right? Victoria has 88 districts, which is the lower house, and 8 regions, which is the upper house or the Legislative Council. So there is 1 candidate per district that gets elected, and there is 5 per region that get elected. And the premier is determined by which party gets the most seats within the 88 districts. If you learn how to vote properly in the federal election, that's great. For the lower house, which is the green paper, and the 88 districts, whatever you learnt does apply. It's the same. You still need to number every single box. There is something I really do need to address before I move on. Remember, the federal election campaign put the majors last. That does not work in the Victorian lower house, okay? You have to number every box, but if you put the majors last, then you'll be putting parties like the Victorian Socialist Party in front of the Liberal Party. And look, we all have our opinions about the Liberal Party, but I would rather put them before the Victorian Socialist Party, for example. So put majors last concept. Please put that out of your mind for now. We really need to look at each individual district and region to actually come up with the right way to vote. Keep in mind, we are going to give you everything you need. So don't be overwhelmed. Don't worry, we've got you. And there's a lot of people working on this. So just stay tuned. Everything will be fine. So now let's talk about the upper house ballot. Now, this is the really big white one. You would have remembered filling it in for the federal election. It's going to look more or less similar with slightly different instructions. You also need to forget what you learned in the federal election when it comes to the big white ballot paper. Let's talk about above the line first. In the short video I just played for you, you would have heard the lady talking about group voting tickets and that you only need to number 1 box above the line. Now, that is indeed how it is done, which is very different to the federal election. So listen up for what I'm about to talk about. Your number 1 means a great deal. It always does, but in the Victorian state election, it means even more. If you put a 1 next to your favorite party above the line, you must know what their group voting ticket is, because your preferences will actually flow according to their group voting ticket. Don't worry, I'm going to explain. I will now read off the VEC website for more clarity. As said before, if you keep up to date with our communication, you won't miss a beat, I promise. So here goes. I'm going to read this stuff to you. Now, all groups must submit at least one group voting ticket. Group voting tickets for the 2022 state election must be submitted to our head office from 9 a.m. on Saturday, the 12th of November to 12 noon on Sunday, the 13th of November, just before pre-polling starts. Group voting tickets are used to determine how your group wants to direct preferences when someone votes above the line. You can read more about it here, and I'm going to go to that link in a second. All group voting tickets will be published on our website from Sunday, the 13th of November. Voters will also be able to inspect group voting tickets at early voting centres and on election day. So don't be stressed out, because these group voting tickets will be shown to you. Don't worry. I'll go into a little bit more detail after I finish reading the next slide. Above the line. Now, keep in mind, this is all about the big white piece of paper. Above the line. The boxes above the line are groups of candidates that have registered one or more group voting tickets. So that is obviously a party, or if two independents have formed a group. But in this case, mostly parties is what a group of candidates means, actually. To vote above the line, write the number 1 in the box for the group you want to support. Seems pretty obvious. When you vote above the line, your preferences will be decided by the group voting ticket. A group voting ticket is a statement on how each party or group gives preferences to candidates. Every registered group voting ticket is made available on the website before an election and is also on display at major voting centres. So the moral of this story is, folks, that if you want to vote above the line and just put a number 1 next to your favourite party, which is of course easier in a way, you really need to know what the group voting ticket is, because if they do not get in, your vote will then flow however they have decided. So I think you understand, it's really important. And don't worry, we will publish all the group voting tickets as soon as they are available. And I'm sure that some parties will actually be publishing the group voting tickets before the deadline anyway, which will be great. So now let's move on to below the line. Some people will not want to trust the group voting ticket structure and would prefer to vote below the line. So below the line in a state election, the boxes below the line represent each candidate. To vote below the line, write a number 1 in the box of the most preferred candidates. Continue to number at least 5 boxes on the ballot paper in the order you prefer. If you choose to vote below the line, you have control over your preferences. So they say it very clearly there. Above the line, you don't have control of your preferences. Below the line, you do. So it's really up to you which way you want to do it. But if, like I said, if you fully trust a party's preference flow, then you can vote 1 above the line as well. So in short, the green paper is the same as the federal election. Nothing new to see here, except we're not going to put the majors last as a broad concept anymore, are we? Once all the candidates are announced and registered, we will provide you with all the information you need, I promise. And people like Joel Jamal from Turning Point Australia is doing a lot of work for the Victorian election, thank goodness. He's producing how to vote cards, and we'll make sure that you have access to all of them as well. In regards to the big white ballot paper, we obviously don't know each party's group voting ticket yet. So it would be way too hasty to make a decision on someone that we want to vote 1 for above the line, unless you already know where they're voting, but it's not public knowledge anyway, as far as I'm aware. So until we know more, my personal strategy is going to be this. I will definitely be voting under the line, and I will number the candidates from the Freedom parties first. So for example, if my favorite Freedom Party has 3 candidates below the line, I'll go 1, 2, 3, my second favorite Freedom Party, 4, 5, 6, and my third favorite, 7, 8, 9, you get the picture. But something I am going to advocate for a little bit differently this time is, let's say my last numbers happened, let's say all the candidates for the Freedom Party, let's say there's 20 of them. So I've numbered 1 to 20, all the candidates from the Freedom Party. I'm going to put, let's say there's 3 Liberal candidates, I'm going to put them as 21, 22 and 23. Now, it's not because I'm necessarily voting for the Liberal Party. I think we can all agree that they have been pretty spineless, most of them. But I don't want my vote to be wasted. I don't want it to go into the bin. And I don't want mine to go into the bin and then be counteracted by a vote for Labor or Greens. So that's just what I'm doing. Being a Victorian, we have all seen the power of the upper house, of the crossbench in Victoria. People like Fiona Patten and Rod Barton, who basically sealed our fate for the last 2.5 years. Now, the upper house, especially the crossbench, they rarely, if ever, introduce new bills, but they have the power to pass or stop legislation, which is extremely powerful. So even if Labor do win the most seats in the lower house and we still have a Labor premier, whether it's Daniel Andrews or someone else, if we have a different crossbench that is fair and has freedom as their goal, then they won't be able to pass anything without the crossbench's cooperation. So there is hope. And there are at least 5 or 6 parties that I can think of off the top of my head, which Liz is going to go into more detail, that are really doing their best to have a great impact on the Victorian election. So guys, in conclusion, you now know the basics, but stay tuned for way more details. We still have tomorrow's session as well, which I'll be going into more volunteering options and how you can get on the ground straight away. You don't actually need to join a team or have to go into all that structured process. You can do it yourself if you really want to. Grab a friend and do it yourself. So I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. I hope this has helped make you feel more confident for the upcoming election, because it's an important one. And I believe that most Victorians want change. So I can't wait to see the results.
Thank you, Monica. And if there's a little bit of duplication, that's simply because we didn't line up quite at the same times, but that's part of the learning, and you know, we really want to be able to share this. Now, first of all, we have gone the terrible sin of going overtime, but we have 2 very good speakers coming up. If you're under time constraint, they're both they'll take about 12 minutes each, or about 11 and a half. So if you're under time constraints, you can come back and watch the recording. But if you're able to, I would really, say these are a highlight, and it is a highlight tonight to be hearing from these 2 eminently qualified and respected guest speakers. And as I said, you can listen again on YouTube. The first being Rabbi Shimon Cowan, who is a rabbi, teacher and researcher in the Jewish community of Melbourne. And I'm going to put... Well, I'd like to introduce to you now Rabbi Shimon Cowan, who is a rabbi, teacher and researcher in the Jewish community of Melbourne. A big welcome, Rabbi Cowan.
Thank you, Liz.
Well, I've got a question that has got quite a lot of substance for you tonight, and that is, what are the basic issues and principles at this election on the basis of which we should embrace particular candidates and parties?
Well, Liz, you gave me some notice of this question, and I've made some notes. So please excuse me if I look down from time to time at what I've prepared.
You're most welcome.
Now, this is an election about reviving the human spirit and its moral compass. We live in a dark time, one of confusion, one of some despair, and a good deal of unhappiness. We locked down for almost 2 years because of a pandemic, but really the human being in our state has been in a state of spiritual lockdown. We need hope, joy, and above all, moral clarity. Now, you'll forgive me if I briefly mention that the Bible tells us that humanity once also faced a deluge, a great flood, which in fact did destroy human life on the face of the earth. However, the Creator enabled humanity and nature to survive, and he did this by enabling one individual, Noah, biblical figure of Noah and his family, together with a number of species of animals which he brought into the ark, to recommence civilization. And this was done on the basis of fulfillment of a number of universal moral principles, which actually bind humanity down to this very day. And I'd like to mention also that these are the roots of the world faiths and cultures. It's not something which is specific to any one religion, but they are universal principles. And I think what we have to say is that we will embrace candidates and parties who will uphold this ancient, eternal, unchanging moral compass. And I want to apply the main points. There are 7 points of this moral compass, and to set them out for you, particularly as they apply to the situation in Victoria today. The first is belief and the right to believe. Now, the government of this state, unfortunately, has damaged the freedom of the human being, and especially of young people, to believe. In state schools, it has driven the one weekly class of optional religious instruction out of classroom hours. In new legislation, it has invaded the religious schools, deciding which of their beliefs may be taught and which not. It has removed the rights of parents, guaranteed by international codes, to raise children in their own values. And it has done this with programs which expose young children to sexual behaviors of which their parents very often disapprove. And also, in addition to that, with and against their parents' consent, has taken children out of their care to begin life-altering medical procedures. It forces religious schools to employ staff whose conduct contradicts the values which they wish to imbue in their own students in accordance with their own traditions. Now, we embrace parties and candidates who will restore the rights of children and adults to believe and to provide them with the education which nourishes their belief, particularly children, whether in state or private schools, and who also will fight to restore the rights of parents to raise children in their own beliefs and to put an end to state interference with these rights. The second principle is about respect for a life lived according to conscience, respect for belief. Now, the Victorian state government, through its existing legislation, forces doctors who have a conscientious objection to abortions to participate in them, nevertheless, by being forced to refer individuals to those who will perform the abortions. It blocks the provision of therapy to a person with unwanted same-sex attraction or unwanted gender confusion, and thereby it stops the person who seeks therapy and assistance in the desire to live according to his or her own beliefs. It has introduced jail sentences of up to 10 years for therapists or parents or ministers who express these beliefs and who wish to pursue these beliefs to their own children, to their own congregants, and to assist them in living in accordance with their own conscience. So we will embrace candidates and parties who restore freedom and respect for the practice of religious belief and conscience. Now, the Victorian state government, in the area of the third point, which is that of the traditional family, has created chaos where there was once stability, personal identity within the framework of the traditional family. The gender ideology driven by the Victorian state government and its highly sexualized primary school programs has undermined the identities of male and female. With its commissioning of children for non-traditional families, it has broken the nexus and identities of parent and child. Most recently, it has legalized prostitution, effectively modeling it as a normative behavior for youth. We embrace those candidates and parties who will end the operation of the gender ideology and who will protect the values of sexual morality embodied in the traditional family. 4, the respect for life. The state government has created, unfortunately, and not only it's not something which it began, but which it has greatly consolidated and extended. It has created a culture of death in Victoria with its radical abortion on demand regime, that is abortion for any or no reason at all. It teaches our youth that life has no sanctity and that no responsibility need be taken for the life which a human being creates. The Victorian so-called assisted suicide program is responsible for steadily increasing numbers of killings. It teaches the wrong and despairing message to youth that suicide can be a rational decision. So therefore, We embrace parties and candidates who will curb abortion and remove physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia, who will bring back to our culture the sense of the value and purpose and sanctity and responsibility of all for life. The fifth, economic fairness and freedom. There are two major objectives which make up economic well-being. These are the people are enabled to achieve their basic needs through being able to work or to have jobs, or to be able to have businesses, or where this is impossible, to receive supplementation, assistance from the state. Equally important, it is that individuals are free and unexploited, whether through excessive and illegitimate controls or by market monopolies or scamming. We will embrace those candidates who will work for a human livelihood in a way which balances freedom and fairness in the meeting of human needs. The sixth principle, which is that of justice. Now, justice has to do with the fair and impartial hearing of all parties, where justice works to favor the wealthy litigant who can afford to protract proceedings and financially exhaust a poorer litigant. We don't have a proper system of justice. In the words of a great recent Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia, the Honourable Murray Gleeson, it is the cost structure of the courts and legal system which is the greatest blot on it. Equally, as part of justice, the police must be unpolitical, unswayed by media, and rigorous in its application of legal principle. The courts must be rigorous in their presumption of innocence and the proper burdens of proof for conviction, and impervious to media mobbing. Judges themselves may not be political and must operate in a way mindful of universal ethical principles. So we will embrace parties and candidates who work for true impartiality in the legal system. Finally, 7, a balanced environmentalism. Whilst the human being is bound to not act destructively in regard to the environment, it is a central principle that human livelihood is primary. We cannot accept an environmentalism which borders on an idolatrous nature religion and is prepared to jeopardize human livelihood through huge energy costs, in the erroneous belief that human beings are, quote, the managers of the cosmos. And therefore, we will embrace parties and candidates who will put forward a balanced environmentalism. So basically, they think that these 7 eternal principles, they're phrased in different ways, are the moral compass which needs to be restored to this state.
Thank you, Rabbi Shimon Cowan. That was a concise summary of an enormous subject, and I think I don't think as Victorians have heard a summary like in the public space that is concise like that and addressing this, and it's very, very timely at this moment. So thank you again for what you've contributed today.
My pleasure, Liz. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, thank you. Here we go. Oops. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. I'm going to imagine that people can see me. I can see a black screen. I've done something odd. So what I'm going to do is, as I introduce the next interview, and I'm quite impressed with the people retaining, but that was a very, very good talk. It was really great. I saw some comments there and certainly nailed it. Now, you may be interested. I'm going to send this out in the pack also to people who've all the registrants, simply because I can. Okay, so these are the 2 speakers for tonight. But actually, Rabbi Shimon Cowan has put together a flyer, and that's just a screenshot of it, of course. But it's actually very well researched, and it goes into and summarizes what some of the key legislation that anti-life legislation Andrews government has, and the present government has passed. It goes into that. So there's some very good knowledge in there. Okay, so now it is, let's hope here I am back. Okay, so now it's my pleasure to welcome our final speaker tonight. And if you do run out of time, do come back, and I will just bring him in first. And I'd like to welcome Reverend Dr. Peter Barnes tonight, moderator of the Presbyterian Church of Australia. Thank you for coming and for your time, Peter.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for having me.
The Victoria Change or Suppression Conversion Act 2021, commonly known as the Conversion Act. And so, Peter, what are 2 or 3 issues that disturb you most in the Conversion Act? Who does it punish and for what? And what are the penalties that you'd face with this legislation? And what risks and dangers do children face under this act? And what consequences do you see with government legally prohibiting the parental role that has been, in practice since the beginning of time?
Well, firstly, the legislation. There are 2 aspects I'd draw your attention to. The first one is sexuality, and that's regarded as fixed. So it's protecting, so-called protecting, people from being counselled, from turning from homosexuality or lesbianism to a Christian view. And the second issue is the issue of gender. So while sexuality is regarded as fixed, you cannot suggest that someone will change their sexuality, but you cannot stop someone from changing his or her gender. So if a female feels like she's actually a male living in a female body, or vice versa, then it cannot be suggested that that's not a good way of thinking. You must go along with what the person sees concerning himself or herself. So that is changeable. You can change your gender. I assume you can change your gender quite a few times if you have enough operations, or maybe even just declare it. So that's the 2 very worrying aspects about the legislation. It's arbitrary, in other words. Secondly, the penalties associated with it are quite severe. They're draconian. I know it's a word that's trotted out, but 10 years prison and $100,000 in fines. So this is a declaration of war. There are some people who say, well, let's speak mildly around the table and we can sort this out. But that's not how the legislation comes across. And the third thing is, to whom is it aimed? Well, it's aimed at everybody. It will especially affect parents and friends and counsellors, including pastors and priests. So counselling is forbidden, prayer is forbidden, and sermons will increasingly come under question. It's not logical to say they could leave sermons out there and you can say what needs to be said there, but not elsewhere. That hasn't got much logic to it. It's obviously just something there for the time until they can go further. But they're all under threat, even if help is asked for. If someone declares that he is a male, but he wants to be female, you cannot question that. The parent cannot try to talk his or her child out of that. So it's all there in the legislation. How this is ever accepted as something even half reasonable, anywhere near being reasonable, is beyond me. But it's supposed to be protecting people because it's doing nothing of the kind. This is interference by the big nanny state at a huge level. Dr. Johnson once said that, how is it that the loudest yelps for freedom come from slave drivers? That's about it. You've got the loudest yelps for freedom coming from people who are going to be very coercive, who have the power and who are threatening to use it.
Right. So, Peter, you said you mentioned about not being able to be counselled. People with gender dysphoria, there's not counselling allowed, and you're not allowed to question that, including the parents. But does it go further than that, or is that the limit?
Well, it applies to everybody.
My understanding, just correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that you can only affirm what they say, what the child feels at the time.
Yeah.
So where there is this fluidity that is actually legislated in a very affirmative way in children who are developing, they're very open. Now, I'm trying not to put an ideological or other slant on this. I'm just thinking of this straight of some of the consequences that anyone would care about the consequences of the legislation. So what sort of psychological, now that's a very big question, but if you can say something on that, psychological and perhaps physical consequences too, that are possible for somebody who, may change their mind later yeah.
Well, many have changed their mind later and deeply regretted it. And Tavistock, the transgender clinic in the UK, has just been closed down. And of course, you get all sorts of answers concerning the question of why was it closed down, and a lot of the answers just aren't true. But it's got class action against it, and a great many youngsters who went through this so-called clinic, which I think is the ultimate form of child abuse. The only extra form of child abuse is actually the killing of the child. But the children in their early years and into their teens, there's something like 85% who have this sense of I'm in the wrong body, actually grow through it. So leave them alone. Don't hand them over to so-called experts. The others that might have genuine troubles you might have to deal with, it's still not a solution at all. A great many have changed. I mean, Walt Heyer is one example, is a man who became a woman, then became a man again, and messed up his life. He went through the operations. He's not alone. He's not Robinson Crusoe. There's a growing number of them, and the number is getting frightening. It's taken on faddish proportions.
Right.
You're sterile, your puberty blockers can't be reversed. The decisions you make as a youngster, with all the hormone changes and all the rest of it, in your early teens, they come against you for the rest of your life, and there's not much you can do to change it.
So it really is social engineering to the extreme.
Yes, and it's not medical. It's not beneficial. This is the nanny state. This is coercion.
Yeah.
This is pandering to what would obviously, in a smarter age, would be regarded as a problem. Instead, they're turning it into we need to pander to this, and your best friends are not those who just pat you on the back and tell you you're wonderful all the time. Your best friend could be someone who says, I think you've got this wrong.
So you mentioned about you didn't about not handing people off to the children off to the experts, and it just came to my mind that is that actually handing them off to the experts if the experts are constrained by law to only affirm? So that sounds to me like a conflict. There's some serious conflicts of interest and medical conflicts, ethical conflicts too, and I kind of feel you're going to agree, but that was just something I thought. But I just want to pose this here, Peter. Why would your response not just be religious bigotry, but in fact, you're saying from well-formed knowledge of what conditions that humans thrive on? Like, Peter, are you just a religious bigot?
I'd say a few things. Well, firstly, there's such a thing as secular bigotry, and this enlightenment didn't suddenly appear when the Andrews government took over in Victoria. I mean, they have declared war on what would have been regarded as common sense down through the ages. And so I think it's they who have to convince us that this is a good move. This is coercion. This is unhinged coercion. This is disproportionate coercion. The debate is not allowed. It's shut down. And I would think the God of the Bible, that'd be enough. He created male and female in his own image, and he has declared the way that we are to live. So there's the Christian position. It also fits in with common sense. What we've seen around us is exactly as what we'd expect. So the God of nature is also the God of the Bible. He's not two different gods.
Right.
And if you've got a growing amount of evidence, such as we have, of people who've deeply regretted this, and this has not led to any kind of utopia at all, but quite the reverse. You're just not allowed to raise that. This has shut down everything.
Right.
And there could well be class actions on a large scale if this is allowed.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Yes, yes, that's interesting. Reverend Dr. Peter Barnes, I'm really grateful for your time. We're grateful for your time. And thank you so much for what you've given us today and for bringing forward those really strong concerns of what is actually, the facts are, we all different opinions in certain things, but the facts are this legislation has been driven very hard by this government, and that's part of the topic of our program, is in presenting what people are not aware of. Yeah,
it's a sure sign there's something wrong with it. It's driven so hard.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you, Liz.
Well, there you have it, and I can see that we've got a wonderful viewership, and this was obviously of great interest. So tonight we've touched on some holy cows, and quite interesting, and some unholy cows, and we've stretched you a little by presenting some people that you perhaps wouldn't normally fellowship with, listen to, whatever. But the point is, we are, this is a collective effort of ours, and tonight we've collectively drawn a line in the sand, or this is part of that drawing, the speaking that forth, that line in the sand. And in this program, tonight, I trust we've begun the process that we will continue tomorrow of breaking down our intentions into some steps, into some basic steps that will get us give you the effectiveness in your vote. And the other thing I really wanted from this program was to present it in a way such that you could kind of duplicate it yourself, that you can have those kitchen table conversations between now and November 26 and bring people back to this, to these streams. We've covered some very general and specific, and I'm going to bid you all good night. And thank you so much for joining us. And you'll get an email. I'm going to just, if you weren't registered and you wanted to get those emails, and okay, good night for now. Thank you very much. Got to finish the live stream.